Hello, beautiful people. You are listening to the Communal Table podcast, part of Food and Wine Pro. I'm your host, Kinsman, and really excited about today's guest who it's been just such a joy to see her really step into her much-deserved spotlight recently. You're making a face, but I have admired her work for such a long time as a journalist, as a video host, as a human being, really. I've gotten the chance to work with her editorially before, and now her cookbook has come out, and it has been just a joy to see it. People celebrating it, and it's called Indian-ish, and this is Priya Krishna. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. So you're on this side of the microphone now.
It's very weird, yeah.
Yeah, because I think of you as a journalist who it gets really, really deep in on your subjects. And how has that transition been for you to be this cookbook author who everybody wants to talk to right now?
You kind of find yourself becoming, after you give a certain number of interviews, you find yourself becoming the person that I hate as a journalist, where like you've got I find myself giving the same answers and I'm like, oh God, am I one of those people who gives canned responses now? But at a certain point, people ask so many of the same questions. Right. You're like, I can't reinvent new answers to these. But yeah, it is very funny being on the other side and imagining like, what are they going to quote? What's the opener? What's the kicker going to be? Like,
right. So you're probably thinking of these sort of structurally, because, but it's been really, as I said, a treat to see people embrace this book so much. I was lucky enough to be a tester on this book, and I was probably one of the most annoying testers on there because I have so many dietary restrictions.
You were not the most annoying tester.
Oh, okay, good.
Just not by a long shot, Kat.
There was, I remember I was reading an interview with you, and somebody's grandmother was really irked about was it beans?
Yeah, the chickpea flour, green beans, which is, I don't think that's a controversial recipe, but she hated them.
What was her issue with it?
I don't know. So the background is this woman, I guess it was a friend's grandmother, she wanted to test recipes, and I gave her the chickpea flour, green beans, because again, I thought it was like a pretty simple and uncontroversial recipe. And she just sent me an email being like, hi Priya, I made the chickpea flour, green beans, and I wanted to let you know they were disgusting.
And that was a word she used, was disgusting.
That's all she is. That's all she said.
I unfortunately haven't gotten to try that one because that is like straight up in my wheelhouse of like stuff my gut doesn't handle, but I kind of want to eat them right now.
They're really good. I mean, I called like all the other friends who tested it, and I was like, is this disgusting? And then my friend Caitlin was like, I'm literally sitting in my kitchen eating a pan full of them. So no.
I understand the pan full of this too, because I made an okra dish of yours that it was, I had to share it with my husband, and I was almost annoyed to have to share it because I wanted to just keep eating it.
That is probably one of my all-time favorite dishes made in our house. That was one of those dishes where I'm like, I'm not sure how many people are going to make this because okra, there's a lot of spices. Like, this is definitely one of the more ingredient-heavy dishes in the book, but I don't care. I love it unapologetically, and I want to eat it every day.
Yeah, and so let's talk okra for a second because we were sort of chatting before we started this podcast. I have an okra tattoo on my arm that unfortunately I'm wearing long sleeves today, but it is that important to me, and it is a beautifully cross-cultural ingredient that you find in Southern, you find it in Indian, you find it just all over the place, and it seems to be a love-hate kind of thing for people.
Yeah, I think it's either people hate the slimy texture or they only think it should be deep fried. But I feel like the slimy texture, it's like you can very easily get rid of that. You just need to cook it properly. I feel like a lot of people just don't know how to cook with okra. But it's something for me that's always just been an everyday part of my life. So I never tasted slimy okra. That was new to me when I heard about that.
Yeah, I think maybe people have just had bad okra. People try okra. Even okra raw is a lovely thing.
I'm not crazy about raw okra, but I think it's just because I've gotten so used to my mom doing this basically how she does it is she like kind of dry fries it and it chars and crisps, and I just love the way that it just gets those like crisped, burnt edges. And I just did a dinner with Katie Button, who does karate in Asheville.
Love that woman.
And she made the okra. And I hadn't eaten that okra in a really long time. And I took a bite and I almost started crying. I was like, this is my mom's okra, Katie.
But this also is you translating your mom's okra in a really meaningful way. And for people who aren't familiar with this, your mother is a huge component of the book, which would you call it co-author?
She's my co-author.
Yeah.
She's on the cover of the book. That was like a stipulation. My mom's name has to be on the cover. She wrote all the recipes.
I love that so much. And I mean, what was her take on being asked to do this? Is it something she ever aspired to? Because I mean, I know that her cooking is so deep within you, but is it writing a cookbook? Is this anything that she ever considered? Was there a negotiation process with her about doing this?
It was kind of one of those things where I sold the cookbook and then I was like, I sold a book of your recipes, Mom.
And was she just all in at that point?
Yeah, I think my mom was really excited about it. I think what's really interesting about her career is that my mom became a software programmer almost because she immigrated here. She wanted a career, and that was what my dad was doing. So it was like a known entity to her. But I always wonder what would happen if she had a choice, like if she kind of knew all the different career possibilities that were available to her. If she had a close friend or family member who worked in food, like I definitely think she would have been like a recipe developer. Like I see my mom as like a Melissa Clark type figure, were she to not have gone into food. I mean, I hope that this book has kind of made her into that in a way. And, my mom's retiring this year and, she's not even 60 yet. So she's got a whole other career in front of her.
It's her time. It's absolutely her time. And I mean, it's reading the book and reading everything about the book and the conversations that you've had around it. One of the joys of that has been getting to know all these things about your mom and her as a boundary buster, all these sorts of things. So did you grow up with her encouraging you to like, hey, go be a journalist, or go, and you were studying French?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for my mom was that she wanted me and my sister, she wanted us to be independent. She saw in Indian culture, women are financially dependent on men. And I think to her, it didn't matter what we did. She was just like, I want you to feel professionally fulfilled and be financially independent. She was like, I don't want you to have to rely on anybody else. I want you to just, be able to rely on yourself. And I feel like that was the dominant discourse when we were talking about, the rest of our lives at home.
That is a fantastic and important thing too, because I also was sort of raised. My parents wanted us to be happy, my sister and me, and it didn't matter what that looked like to them, which is great. So they never sort of forced us into a particular model of having to be a certain way. Didn't expect us necessarily to get married or have kids or do whatever. They wanted us to have an education, so we would have the possibility to do whatever we wanted to. And so when you were studying, so this is not your first book.
No, it's not, which most people think it is, but it is not.
Yeah. And the book came out of your college experience. The first book came out of your college experience. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, I was one of those people who I just like, I got to college and I was like, these are my people. This is who I am. I was bullied in high school. I did not fit in. I was on the debate team and I was like very much on the outskirts of social life. And then I got to college and I was like, these are all like-minded people who think like me and, they like love working hard and they're super nerdy, but they also really like having a good time. And it was just one of those things where I immediately just like fell into the campus culture. And one of those things was writing a food column in the college newspaper.
And which school was this?
I went to Dartmouth in Hanover, New Hampshire. So, in Hanover, there are no restaurants. So a food column could never be like a restaurant-focused column. So I was like, what if, I figured out ways to jazz up dining hall offerings. Like, you take a sweet potato and layer it with some butter and cinnamon cereal and microwave it and put ice cream on it. And it kind of tastes like sweet potato pie, things like that. And so every week I would publish this column. It was called the DDS Detective. DDS stands for Dartmouth Dining Services. And
I love that.
Like, I remember this was like for the first time ever, I remember seeing this guy on a Friday when the column came out, he would have the column in one hand. He was at the cafeteria and he was following things around. And people didn't see my byline. They didn't see that like I was not anonymous. So some people thought I was anonymous. So they'd be like, "Who is the DDS detective?" And I'd be like, "But you can see my name. My name is right there."
I love that. So, I mean, so you had a really early exposure to food writing in that particular way, and the
Yeah.
effect that it has when people are making your dishes.
Yeah, but and like not in the way, not in the way that you think that they are, but they're making your dishes in the dining hall. And it so happened that the Dartmouth Dining Services Administration was also reading the column. And so they were like, "Could we hire you to just like help consult on our menus and tell us what students want?" And so they hired me. I was like Dartmouth's first dining marketing person. And I was also certified to drive a bus. I had my
Wait,
bus license.
How did that happen?
Well, for another organization, I had to get bus certified. So I had my bus license and they were like, "We need someone to drive the bus to different dining conferences around the country." So I drove the bus. I like drove all of the dining people to these conferences, and I got to go to these conferences and figure out like what are the ingredients that, these other colleges have access to? What are the new things that are coming into dining halls? What equipment do people have access to? And I realized there's a finite number of ingredients and equipment that most dining halls seem to have on hand. And that's kind of when the idea for the book came about. Like, what if I could create like a universal version of my column that like no matter what dining hall you're in, here's how to change up your routine.
I love this. I mean, and was this your first foray into journalism?
Yeah, I guess so. I was writing the column originally came out of me writing for the Culture magazine. Dartmouth has this amazing magazine called The Mirror that basically like looks at a different aspect of Dartmouth life. We did one on gender. We did one on, harassment even before the Me Too movement, Greek life, things like that. And I think one thing that I took away from that is like I love looking at what things like how you can use an issue to like as a reflection of like what are our cultural values, what is important to us. And I think I realized while writing that column that food is a really great way to do that. Food is always a good way in. There's always a food angle.
Yeah, they're really, really. Yeah, you really can find the food angle in
Yeah.
absolutely everything. Can we back up for a second, if this isn't too weird to talk about? You talked about being bullied in high school, and I was too, and feeling othered in different ways. And food was the way where I was able to connect with people and draw them in. I was a weird kid growing up, and I realized if I could feed people, have them come
Interesting.
over and like bake for them or whatever it was, it was a little bit easier to, connect with people. I know that you've talked about having that moment where, you were eating different food than the other kids around you because you grew up in Dallas and you went to the majority Jewish school, I think. And so you were the person who was bringing a lunch that was different. And that in that way, food can other you from people. When did you make the shift from othering to connecting on food?
It wasn't until I started writing about food, truly. Like when I was growing up, I made my mom pack me PB&Js because I just did not want to feel different. I mean, it was ironic. I was bullied by one person, and it was like another brown girl.
Yeah.
Which that's always what happens. It's like the crab in the bucket mentality, and so it almost like alienated me even more from my culture.
Yeah.
That happening. And I think it was. When I went freelance from Lucky Peach, I didn't know what I was doing. I had never written a story before. I remember someone asked me if I had written a long form feature, and I sent a paper from college.
Yeah.
And, I had to write what I knew. And so I talked to my parents, I mined them for stories, and I started to realize like these things that made me really different is a perspective that's not well represented in food media. And when it is represented, oftentimes, the people writing about Indian food aren't Indian.
Yes, that is very true. And it's exoticized in a really super crappy way.
It's reduced to the word curry. It was just, and I was like, I can sit around and complain about it, or I can be that voice. And I didn't want to pigeon myself into writing just about Indian food, but when I was starting out and sort of figuring out how to pitch and how to come up with nuanced ideas, it was a really good sort of starting point
Right.
to be like, okay, what are the food traditions in my house, and how would this translate to this magazine or this publication?
Yeah. And you do, you're also a journalist who writes about other people in a really meaningful way, whether, it's a kitchen, restaurant that is trying to combat the opioid crisis, or you're profiling a chef, or you're writing about the butter chicken queen. Like you've written for the freaking New Yorker. And this is such a, you have a place in the pantheon. It's a really, really lovely thing. I mean, I'm looking at these bylines that you have in the New Yorker and the New York Times and all that. And, we were just at a conference, at the IACP conference in Santa Fe, and I was running a panel on imposter syndrome and anxiety and stuff. And I stacked the deck with some people who I think to be really, really high powered in this.
Yeah.
I had Nick Sharma, Osai Endelin, and Kim Severson on this panel, and them all talking about, and they're all people who have really well respected bylines, books, all this kind of stuff, and them still feeling this particular way. You have amassed this. How does it feel? Like, do you feel like, aha, I have made it? I have.
Of course not. Yeah.
I say this because I think it's important for people to hear this conversation said out loud among people who, you're going to be on the Today Show next week. You're going to be doing all these things. It would be very easy for somebody to think like, she's sitting pretty now.
Yeah. No, I never, ever feel like that. In fact, I feel like the one thing my mom always tells me is that I need to just like, when a good thing happens, just stew in that happiness for a little bit more. I'm so bad at stewing in my own happiness.
Same.
I'm always like, okay, I've done this, but like, what's next? I mean, I'm always thinking not about what I have achieved, but what I haven't achieved. Like, honors I have not gotten, places I have not written for, this pitch that I haven't heard from, this place that didn't cover my book. I'm always, always, always thinking about that. And I feel like my therapist told me that every morning I need to wake up and write down one thing that I'm really excited about for that day and something that I'm really proud of. And I started doing that. I need to start doing it again because I just got back from my book tour. But I feel like that was a really great reminder of like, this is why today is going to be a good day, because I'm doing this awesome thing that I have earned because I am a accomplished and like talented human being. And that is a really, really hard thing to say out loud, especially as like women. We're sort of told to not toot our own horns. And when we do, it sort of feels out of turn and uncomfortable. And I mean, even just promoting the book in and of itself and
So
talking about
hard.
yourself,
Oh God.
you're just like, you like to yourself, you're like, can you just shut up about your book?
This is what you need, hype men. I will happily be your hype man. And it's funny because I so want to champion the people who I think are doing such a great job. And I see the depth with which you tell other people's stories, and it in a really special way that nobody else could do. You're a rigorous journalist, and you have these parts of yourself out there too. And I know that putting yourself out there is a kind of a terrifying thing to do, to be the person who writes about other people and then be like, here's who I am.
Yeah.
And also, I do want to get into the ish of Indian ish, but I know that there are going to be people out there saying, well, that's not.
Oh my God, every day. I think that's what has given me the most anxiety is Indians, especially Indians from India, reaching out and being like, why are you calling for olive oil? Why are you explaining this to people? This is obvious. Why are you saying this? That's not right. This represents upper caste views. It's always comes back to caste. It's just that stuff is really, really hard. And I feel like I'm still not good at dealing with that.
That's got to be so. Anybody I know who, what, we're in this really great phase of, first generation, second generation, starting to write cookbooks. And when I saw you ever so briefly in the hallway at this conference, we were talking to another writer, Jake Cohen, who is doing Jew-ish. And it's a really, I feel like, and you totally correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we are in a really amazing and exciting phase of writers claiming what maybe made them different as a kid, maybe made them different from the dominant culture around them growing up in America, and really owning it in a special and meaningful kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome. I feel like this sort of ish style cooking sort of puts a label on what's been happening for a really long time. And I realize, like, when I think about the restaurants in the US that excite me the most, there's always that element of ish, someone combining the flavors of their heritage with the city that they're in or the influences that they've had. And I think, I think it excites me the most when in that food you can see a story. And I feel like that's what distinguishes it from like fusion cuisine, where you're just kind of arbitrarily combining these two things and there's not really a meaning or a narrative behind it.
Yeah, there felt to me in this book to be such a deep reality, like your reality. And it's funny, it must feel so personal working on it, but then what's the universal been like? I'm sure that so many people, I remember I saw Mindy Kaling put you.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah. And I imagine that seeing representation like that for like first gen kids has got to be, what's been the response from other people who have grown up with immigrant parents, having this experience growing up, as maybe not part of the dominant culture, but claiming their own. Have you heard from people about that?
Yeah, and I almost feel like those are the people I'm most excited to hear about, is people who are like, I've never seen someone who looks like me in the Bon Appetit Cast Kitchen with a book, doing this sort of thing. I think it's something I'm really careful about because I don't want to pretend like I represent the entire Indian American experience.
Absolutely.
But I think, like in the same way that, when I would see people like Mindy Kaling on The Office and Maneet Chauhan on Chopped, like it means something to see people who look like you in the mainstream media.
Yeah, that is got to be huge. Please tell me you save those emails, you save those letters, you're able to bank that somewhere and hold it.
I should. It's a lot of Instagram DMs. I don't know how to save those.
Screenshot that stuff. I think it's really important because the thing is, this is not going to be your last book by any stretch. This is just another sort of wave of stuff that you have coming in your career and stuff. And it's so easy to get down in the parts between, writing a big story and the parts between writing a book. And I feel like it's so important to bank that stuff and hold on to it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's just, it's like, those are the things that I tear up the most when I see, because I was definitely a kid who was like, why is there no one who looks like me on TV or in food magazines? I mean, even when I open up food magazines now, like most of them don't feature people who look like me or dishes that I grew up with. I feel like, I talk a lot about with other Indians how like you read a food magazine and the operating assumption is that you grew up eating like roast chickens and spaghetti, whereas to a lot of people that is foreign food. That's as strange as it gets. Like I still have never roasted a chicken, and I don't know, like it just feels like the dominant narrative is like a very Western-centric one. So I feel like the biggest thing for me that I feel like I can do is show like everyone has a different normal, and my normal is dal chawal, and we shouldn't pretend like everyone is operating from the same normal.
Yeah, that is such an important thing. And I mean, and it's definitely something where as an editor, as a writer, I've had to, sit with myself in the discomfort of my own framing of things and realizing, where I've othered people or, and that kind of thing. And, it's a work in progress. I see, people maybe starting to do the work, but I think a lot more could be done about that. And
yeah. Like, I read in a magazine, someone was like, you may not have heard of gochujang, but I'm like, quite a few people in America have because they're Korean.
Who's the you?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I saw Samin Nosrat call out Renee Redzepi like in the last few days of saying, whatever, I forget.
Georgian cuisine is undiscovered.
I'm like, whole lot of Georgians
Yeah.
have known about this, but I mean, and maybe there's the baggage of people saying like, oh, I haven't found like the the Scandi stuff, or
Yeah.
and it's it's such an other thing, and I think that we're swallowing a lot of discomfort along with this stuff too, and it's so important to have those awkward conversations
Yeah.
around it. But you in Dallas growing up, you rolled deep with family.
Yeah, we had and still have an enormous, enormous family. In fact, I literally, in between the conference I went to and my stop in Nashville, I flew home to Dallas so that I could hang out with my family and that we could all watch the Game of Thrones series finale together.
That's so lovely. And how did you feel about it?
It was complicated feelings. Could be a whole other podcast.
I like food writers on Game of Thrones and also Avengers. Like it tends to be, it's somehow become a through line on this. You'll hear me talk about Deadpool on an upcoming episode, actually. But I love that you had this intense family situation. How did the cooking break down gender wise?
Oh, I mean, it was pretty. I mean, it's funny. You'll find dishes from my uncles and my aunts in here. I would say it was pretty split. I mean, the other thing is like all my aunts and all my uncles, everyone worked. No one didn't work. So it was not like someone had more free time to cook than the other. My uncle Hemant ran his own software company, but my aunt Sangeeta was a pediatrician. They were both equally occupied, so they would kind of divide and conquer the cooking responsibilities. They each had their signature dishes that they would make. And I feel like growing up with there not being an expectation that a certain person cooks was really awesome. I definitely grew up with a lot of the really traditional norms around gender and even culture kind of not existing for me. It's funny that you mentioned that my school was really Jewish, because I remember asking my mother, being like, oh, so Judaism is the predominant religion in America. And my mom being like,
I grew up just straight up Catholics. And I sort of getting out of that bubble was interesting. But well, actually though, I remember, and I've written about this moment a few times because it was just kind of what changed food for me. My mother would cook the everyday stuff, and my dad would do kind of the weekend stuff, specifically because my mother was working on weekends, and she taught the religious education program at our parish, and my dad loves to cook, and I remember coming home one day and I was like, the house smells different. It smells amazing, or whatever. And he had picked up Madhur Jaffrey's invitation to Indian cooking, and so that became our sort of norm around the house, was cooking these Indian dishes to the point where they just kind of became part of the repertoire. And they were, and I want to get into this a bit because for him, it was like the project cooking kind of thing. But you've spoken really openly about making sure that this stuff isn't, in your book, especially, not considered project cooking. It's just cooking.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think, especially when you see a lot of publications cover food from communities of color, it's not included in like the everyday home cooking section. It's like, we're going to do this really pretty 5-page spread with recipes, but the presumption is like these recipes aren't everyday recipes. But the food that I grew up with is the food my mom made in 20 minutes when she got home and had to put dinner on the table. It's very, straightforward, unfussy food, minimal steps, minimal pans. The grocery bill is affordable. All of these things are considered because those are the constraints my mom was working with when she was cooking and shopping.
Yeah, I mean, what I really loved is I was testing your book and Chandra Ram's book at the same time, and it was really an excuse and a joy to be able to go and replenish my ingredients on things, because some things I just hadn't cooked with for a while and had to toss out, some things I hadn't used before, and I bought all these ingredients. I've kept on using them.
That's great.
Because you taught, it's not just recipes, you've taught technique in there as well. Can we talk about building up spices and layers, just with toasting, with using ghee, with just getting more out of spices?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like people think it's this really mysterious process, but it's just like, as long as you put some oil or ghee in a pan and toast your spices, you can even toast them dry without any ghee. That's when you're getting the most flavor out of them. And you don't have to grind them. My mom loves using whole spices, and it's less of a step. Like, we use mostly whole cumin seeds, which I feel like not a lot of people aren't necessarily, Western audiences aren't necessarily used to like biting into a whole cumin seed, but it is they're amazing. They add this amazing texture. They're a little bit smokier, a little bit earthier. And it's funny because I feel like people are so nervous about cooking with spices. And so I made a little guide in the book, like a flow chart that's like how to cook all of the Indian food in this book. And it's basically like an overgeneralized chart that I was trying to get more recipes from my mom, and she got so exasperated on a napkin. She was just like, here's how I develop recipes. She was like, you start with ghee or oil, then you either have this combination, or this combination. You never combine these things, but everything else is fair game. Then you add your veggie, then you add your onions, then you add your veggies. Then you think about what acid do I need? Then you think about, does this dish need texture? And looking at that, I was like, oh, Indian food is so easy.
Yeah.
It's literally just starting with your spices, adding onions or garlic or ginger or all of them, adding your next step, whether that's your vegetables or your protein, and then like finishing it with some sort of acidic element and texture. That's all it is.
Yeah. And it was felt so achievable when I was doing these. I mean, I practically fist pumped while making things, because it was the using the spice as a textural element as well was kind of the really thing that sent it over the top for me, because I'm such a texture junkie.
Yeah.
To have that crunch, to have that beauty in there.
You tested the green chili cherry tomato quick pickle, right? Yeah. And that is just like a textural journey of a dish. And it takes 5 minutes.
I used it on everything. I actually need to make a new batch of it because I just started using it on things, and I could feel it like in that really great way up through my ears a bit. And it's such a beautiful thing. And it was cool and refreshing.
I love that recipe so much.
Yeah, I think this summer I just need to have it in the pantry or in the fridge or whatever, at all times. And that's another really great thing about the book is these things that kind of cross over that you can make a condiment of some sort and transform. And it's one of those things where what you did in this, and I can't talk enough about like the amazing structure of the charts and things that you made. It's like seeing through the Matrix. Like once you do it, you're like, I can achieve that thing. And that. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the process of writing a cookbook, because this is sort of the Food and Wine Pro audience, and I know there are a lot of people thinking, probably a lot of restaurant chefs and people in food, or I think there are a lot of just civilians too who think like, oh, I want to write a cookbook. Yeah, it's real hard.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I feel like I went into it knowing that it would be difficult, and it was 10 times more difficult.
Yeah.
I think that what fundamentally makes a cookbook very stressful is that it is a million teeny tiny decisions that all feel monumental. Every little thing feels like, from, the way that the chilies are positioned in this photo when you're taking a photo, to, the explanation of this dish, to, is it 2 tomatoes or 3 tomatoes? Like, everything keeps you up at night, and it's so funny because I would get over a hump and be like, wait, the hard part is done. But no, every part is hard. And it's unbelievably rewarding, but it's hard at every step, first figuring out what are the recipes that are going to go in here. Then, I moved home to Dallas for a month to test them. And that was really stressful because I was just, every single day I was waking up, I was sauteing onions. It was just like, it was really intense. It's really hard. And when a recipe doesn't work, it's really disheartening. And my mom would come home and tell me everything that was wrong with all the dishes I had made. And then we'd cook things together, and she would sneakily add cardamom, and I'd be like, Mom, there's no cardamom in the ingredient list. And working with your mom is wonderful in the ways you think it'll be wonderful, and like also really difficult in the ways that working with your mom and your family can be really difficult. But then there were certain moments that just, when you taste something for the first time. The very first time I tasted my mom's sag feta, which is this classic sag paneer, but she swaps out the paneer with feta. I remember I almost cried. I was like, this is so good. Like, and I hadn't had it in a really long time. And just having those moments of like, my mom is a genius.
Yeah.
Made all the difficult moments a little bit better. But, it's really tough. I think a lot of people don't know what they're going into when they're getting into it. And also like how much how much of your time it takes at every step. You know, it's up to you to lead the charge on publicity and marketing.
Yeah, let's talk about that
yeah.
hustle. That's hard.
It's really tough because, you know, ultimately, like, it's up to you and your, like, you've got the contacts. Like, a publicist can reach out as much as they want, but if you have the personal relationship, it's you who has to send that email. And that's really tough, and that can be really taxing, and it's really stressful. It was so stressful for me sending an email being like, "Hi, I have a book coming out. Like, do you want to do something on it?" And being like, "Hey, cover me." You know, it just feels so weird and icky.
God, I know.
Yeah.
My book came out the week after the election. So yeah, it's really hard. And I thought, like, I don't want to interfere with people's lives. I don't want to, do whatever. But the thing that I have seen, and this has really been a joy, is to see the people rally. I think I had tweeted a while back about, this is going to be the book of the year. Like, I remember getting the galley of it and being like, yep, this is as good as I thought it was going to be. And it's been really fun seeing people find the book and want to shout it from the rooftops. And people don't do that with all books. People, have become your hype man. Mindy Kaling became your hype man. Was that a surprise, by the way?
I was sitting on my couch alone, and there was no one around me. And I remember I saw that, and I just looked around being like, who can I tell this to? This is insane.
Well, and the picture was great too. So you had done a fashion spread. How did that picture happen? It's really cute.
That picture is, I'll never look that fashionable ever again. So I was asked opening ceremony for Fashion Week. They basically wanted to do on a all Asian catalog for their fall lookbook, just highlighting what they called like powerful Asians. They called it Slasians.
Oh my God. Good hashtag.
And so Angela Demuga actually brought me in to be.
She's a fashionable human
she
being.
Is extremely fashionable. I was like, wait, Angela, like, you're also going to be in this shoot? Like, will I? Like, Angela's like a whole nother level of fashionable.
She'll roll in wearing a Muppet. Like.
Right, exactly. I was just like, I was like, I don't know, maybe opening ceremony clothes are too out there for me. But then I showed up to the photo shoot and they were like, what are you comfortable wearing? And I was like, I love printed pants. I love prints. And they were like, I'm wearing printed pants now. And so they gave me like this like printed pants with a matching top and these beautiful shoes and these huge earrings. And I mean, I just felt so cool. I was sitting next to the woman who wrote the book To All the Boys I've Loved Before.
God.
And
Jenny
I was
Han?
and I was like too embarrassed to say hi, and that her book like changed my life and that I loved the movie. But it was like I was surrounded by all these people that I was like, these people are way cooler and more accomplished than me, and I just feel very lucky to be in this room right now.
At the same time, this is what we talked about on the imposter syndrome thing. It's like you were asked to be there. It's not like you just sort of rolled up like, hey, I'm Priya. It's not, it's not like they weren't expecting you to show up and pull clothes for you. And it's a really, really hard thing. And so we were talking a little bit beforehand. And actually, I'll bring this up. I don't always do this, but sometimes I wear a specific necklace for a specific guest. Mm-hmm. And today, if people are just listening to this, it's a whole bunch of little tools on a thing. You do many things and you do the work at all of them. And there's this weird thing that happens when you kind of shift around in genres, when you're a journalist who now is a cookbook writer and you also do videos and I'm sure you have a million other sort of things within you. Has that self-definition process been a difficult thing?
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point I was like, do I have to choose? Do I have to be either a journalist or like a home cooking personality / cookbook author? And I had a conversation actually a few weeks back with my editor at the Times, and he was like, no, why would anyone make you choose?
Yeah.
Like who is making you choose? And I was like, I guess no one is making me choose. He was like, if no one's making you choose, then why are you stressed about this?
Yeah. I get it though.
But like, yeah, like people, like I always think like, if you're the one telling the stories, like who's going to care about your story? Because maybe it's presumed that if you're the one telling the story, you don't have a story to tell either.
People are complicated and have many layers to them. I love seeing when people have, they release a new facet of themselves. You have a bus license, like that.
Not anymore. It's expired. But
still, like that is the thing I did not know about you before today. And I just think like it's just people constantly surprise me, and I really, really enjoy that thing. And we also, I've listened to other people interview you about this too, but I would like to talk about how not getting the book necessarily, ghettoized in a way, put into the international cooking, to have it to be in general cooking. And that, like, has that been a battle to, have it categorized on Amazon or in bookstores or anything like that? Is that a battle that you've had to fight?
No, because like I feel like those are decisions that I almost don't have control over. And so knowing that, I was like, I'm going to make I want the word American to appear on the cover.
What is the subtitle of it?
It's Recipes and Antics from a Modern American Family. Antics was a word I thought long and hard. I was they're not just stories, they're antics.
They are antics.
And I wanted someone who's figuring out where to shelve the book to realize, like, this is as American a story as it gets. There is this perception of, like, a smiley white chef on a cover. That's what American cooking is. That's not, that is one facet of American cooking, but American cooking is a lot of things. And I desperately did not want to be, told that that basically my book is not from here. Like, I am not from here, same thing happens on the street. People tell me, like, go back to where you came from. And I want to be like,
Dallas?
Texas? Yeah.
I just interviewed Vishbot, who I love that man. And
I love him so much.
And to see him win a James Stewart Award
he's so great.
was such a thrill. And I don't know what order podcasts will air in or not, but sat down with him, and I was actually staying at the same house as him in Chicago, and we were debating, okay, are we recording this before or after the awards? Because it could have gone either way, and it and luckily it went a really, really good way, and we did it after he'd won his award. Right now, the working title of his book is "I'm From Here."
That's an amazing title.
Yeah, I love that because he grew up in India. But he's spent half of his life in Mississippi or just in the South, and people expect him to be cooking Indian food. He's not cooking Indian food, but he always is having to answer that question: "Where are you from?" "I'm from here."
Yeah.
And the thing also that he and I talked about was his worry about. He's been part of the Brown in the South sort of coalition, doing these pop-up dinners throughout the South. But then I think he worries about getting put, too much on this particular table. Like, yes, we've built this new table, but then how, then you worry about getting sort of niched in too hard on that.
Totally. Like, I heard conversations. I was like, we already, like, My Tooth Salads exists by Asha Gomez, which is about,
I love that woman.
It's a great book about her experience in the Indian South and the American South. And, there are places that are like, well, we already have a cook about an Indian chef in the South, therefore we don't need another one, which is insane. Or, like, I hear, like, Nick Sharma, I heard him say in an interview that a publishing company was like, we've already released an Indian cookbook, so we don't need another one. As if, like, there can only be one or two
It's
cookbooks.
not freaking Highlander.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
And
so that has always been so surprising to me, that people are willing to put out, like, 1 million chicken and keto and pasta cookbooks, but in some reason, like, Indian cookbooks or Korean cookbooks or just cookbooks that are not white. Yeah. Somehow people are like, that's where people have a limit. Same thing with staffers. They're like, well, we have one. We have this staffer, so we don't need another one. You see it everywhere.
Yeah, it is a thing that, do you feel like there's a change afoot? Do you feel hope at all in this realm?
I feel hopeful on some days and less hopeful on other days. I think I'm really proud of my colleagues at the New York Times, who I feel like have really, this past year or two, recognized, like, we are a mostly white staff and something needs to change, and we need to change our staff. We need to change the way that we get recipes. We need to change the types of people that get, prominent coverage in the newspaper. And there has been a really marked shift, I think, in the Times coverage. And I've been really, like, amazed and, like, impressed by everyone over there.
Yeah, it's been pretty palpable, and there's always more that can be done.
Yeah, like I would love to see a columnist of color over there.
Yeah.
I think that would be amazing. But, I think like putting Tejal back in the restaurant critic seat
She's so good.
was amazing. I'm so happy to see a woman of color in such a powerful position like that.
I mean, she's just a straight up great writer. She
Yeah.
could write about anything.
Literally anything, and I would read it. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were writing the cookbook, and and you being a journalist who writes the cookbook, were there any particular role models that you had? Like, you loved their approach, you loved how they write a head note, or how they categorize. Like, who were you looking to do this? How did you learn how to do this?
I had a lot of friends who were cookbook writers who just were so good at and so open with lending me their advice. I mean, the first person that comes to mind is Julia Turshen. I've always admired her books. I remember reading through Small Victories and just loving how conversational the tone was. Like, she was just having like a casual chat with you. And I wanted my book to feel that same way. And I think that's how, when I'm not doing my like, big profiles, that's how my writing naturally is. It's really conversational, kind of reaching in and being like, here, come into my kitchen, let's hang out, and no worries if you mess this up, it's all good. So that style was something that really resonated with me. In terms of recipe writing, Mary Frances Heck was so
home crew here at Food and Wine.
Was just so unbelievably helpful. I would send her recipes and she would send me back a list of questions I need to answer in that recipe. She would streamline the recipe for me. She did such a good job when we worked together on the Lucky Peach cookbooks on making those recipes so doable and straightforward, but still, written in a really beautiful and fun way. And I relied on her a lot. And then also other Indian cookbook authors, like I talked a lot to Chitra Agrawal about, how do you talk about Indian green chilies? How do we identify those? Is there a specific varietal you can point to? And can I just say red chili powder, or do I have to say Kashmiri red chili powder, cayenne, paprika, things like that when you're writing a cookbook with Indian flavors, that the dilemmas that come up. And then the other person who I just really have admired for a really long time is the woman I profiled in the New Yorker, Urvashi Pitre. Her book on Instant Pot Indian food was kind of what really, really re-engaged me with cooking Indian food at home. I remember making dal in my Instant Pot and, to use your word, fist pumping. I literally fist pumped the sky. I was like, this is so fucking good. And I also love the tone of her recipes. I love the doability of her recipes. It was amazing to me seeing how she had inspired a generation of Indians to cook the food of their heritage, people who never thought that was possible, but who craved those flavors of home. And I was like, I would love to follow in those footsteps and to do something really similar to what she did.
Yeah, I imagine there will be. This book is a gift to people, and I feel like it'll help other people who have become disconnected from their food, or the generosity of spirit brings in people like me who I grew up with my dad cooking these foods from cookbooks, and it's something that somehow I lost along the way. I think because I don't cook as much as I should. I cook a fair amount, but I don't, and then by the time I do it, I'm starving and think. But it really reinvigorated my relationship. I don't think I told you this, actually. Maybe I did. It made me entirely reorganize my cupboard system because I realized, you reintroduced me to things that I had been missing for a while, and I thought I need to organize my my cupboard situation so I can reach for those things easily. And I started setting out a speed rack for myself of things that I keep right out on the counter. Yeah, so you actually had a huge influence on the physical makeup of my kitchen.
Wow,
so
I'm honored.
It's really become such a beautiful thing. And then having my husband come home and be like, oh, so what's happening? Because it was just a really, really lovely thing to thank you for I always talk sometimes about that like moment in Narnia where like opening up the wardrobe kind of thing. But you did that for me, and this book did this for me.
I'm so happy to hear that. I mean, it's so funny, Kat, because I feel like you sent me this super apologetic email of like, I can't eat this and this and this. And I was honestly, I looked at that list and I was like, actually, this book is kind of really perfect for these dietary restrictions. And so when I was assigning you recipes, I didn't really have to change anything. I looked at the recipes and I was like, these fit with all of, Kat's dietary needs. And I think one thing that has been really exciting is like Indian food is actually a really accessible food to people who have different restrictions and preferences. Like there are pancakes that have no eggs in them. It's literally just lentils. There is a scrambled egg dish that has no eggs because you replace the eggs with tofu or paneer. I get questions all the time of, gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan. And I weirdly feel like unintentionally my mom created like a very inclusive lineup of dishes.
Wait, once I saw the final recipe lineup, I was like, I can eat the majority of this. Sadly, I can't have lentils, but that's like the one thing. And I'm never going to be able to have your dad's yogurt. And that's about, or maybe my stomach will get fixed because like this is the thing that
because it's
happened.
My dad claims his yogurt can cure anything.
Oh my gosh! So we talked for a second about how many people have your dad's yogurt starter.
Yeah, I mean, I've so many. In fact, when I was home for a day. My dad was like, oh yeah, like 10 people came by today to get my yogurt starter. And this is just like a casual thing that happens in our house.
That's so nice. So what's the family's response been?
They were so confused at first because I remember I had the whole extended family over for a photo shoot and they were so confused that there were cameras there, but they were like, whatever. And so it was so funny. The photographer was like, I've never had a family that's so natural. And I was like, I think they just like pretended to ignore the cameras because they were confused. And I remember showing them, we had all the photos hung up that we had taken and showing them like, Sonyami, here's your chicken, Rachnami, here's your rice noodle poha. And, they didn't have those moments where they were like, oh my God. They were just like, huh, cool. It's like, what is this again?
Oh my God.
And then I think seeing the final product, they're just, I mean, I don't know. I think they're really excited. And it's more just like, they just find it so funny that random people at home are making their garlic ginger chicken and, their sag feta. Like my Aunt Sonia saw her chicken in the New York Times and I had forgotten to tell her.
Oh my goodness.
And she was like, yeah, I saw this chicken recipe. It looked a lot like mine. Then I was like, oh, this is literally my chicken recipe.
Please tell me she like cut it out. She put it up.
My family's not like the cut it out, put it up. She was just like, this is cool.
Oh my goodness. I just want this free. Like,
no, totally. It's so funny because people are like, oh, like, have there been like lots of like sentimental moments? And there have been sentimental moments, but my family is definitely like we all recognize that it's really cool, but we're not like stewing in its coolness. Maybe this is where my refusal to like recognize happy moments comes from. But I mean, I think they're all just like really excited. I think they also just had no idea that the book would have any kind of resonance because I mean, they have no idea. They don't know how this works. And so they'll text me. I get texts every day with them being like, my patient told me that she bought this book and that she saw my name in it. And I told her that that's my recipe, or this, like people who don't know that they're related to me being like, so-and-so told me about this book. And I had like the pleasure of being able to say I'm related to that person. And so that, I think those moments are really cool. I think all any Indian parent ever wants is to be able to, at the party, to be like, what's your kid up to be able to understand what they do and like say something tangible.
Oh my, I really hope they all tune in and watch the Today Show next week because
the Today Show is something they very much understand. That and like when I was in the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
They understand the Wall Street Journal.
I love that, these like different family benchmarks kind of thing. I'm going to ask you the worst question.
Uh-huh.
What's next for you? Is there another book on the horizon? Is there a new profile that you're working on that you can talk about?
I mean, I don't know. I'm always excited about like I geek out over all of my stories. the benefit of traveling across the country is that you get really inspired. I was in Nashville the other night and I met this woman who's telling me that Nashville has the biggest population of Kurds outside of Iraq. And she was like, and, it's been really interesting in Tennessee. It's like politics is very divisive here. And a lot of people are really terrified of ICE and the travel ban. And the way that they have all come together and like band as a community is through tailgating at Tennessee Titans football games.
Wow.
And so there's this like small but mighty group of Kurds that make like kebabs and pita and cheese like and like feta. And she was like, this woman, she's Gujarati, part of like the Gujarati tailgating community in Tennessee. And she was like, you know what? Like Kurdish food makes amazing tailgating food. It's all like great finger food that you can just like pick up and munch on. And so if I've emailed a few of them, and so hopefully they respond. And so that's a story that I'm hoping to work on a few months from now. That one I was so excited about.
I really want to read this story. If nobody else picks it up, I'm picking it up. We'll send you the story. It's amazing. I'm so thrilled for you. And a question I ask everybody, what is the selfish thing that you want? This is the moment you get to say out loud, what is the thing that you want? For yourself.
I would love an Indianish like home cooking show.
Oh, hell yeah.
Like I want one that takes place in Texas with my parents, with my family, with our family friends, with everyone, that sort of normalizes the upbringing that I had, and where, we talk about the importance of toast in Indian cuisine. We make yogurt with my dad and use it in all these different ways, where we go out to Tex-Mex restaurants and then come home and make roti enchiladas. Like I want a show that is reflective of the life that we've lived, because obviously, I don't know, I feel like through the book it's resonated, and I don't think that there's necessarily a show out there that's done for Indian food what, other people have done for Italian food and French food. I think that would be really nice.
Yeah, dear Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, CBS, HBO, like whoever is listening to this, like please do this for Priya, do this for the country. I would watch the hell out of that show. Yeah, let's make that. Yeah.
Let's will it into the universe. Yeah.
I totally believe in saying it out loud. So what is your comfort food?
It's funny. Enchiladas are a huge comfort food because I grew up in Texas, and that is it for me. Also, curry, which is this turmeric yogurt stew that you cook until it gets really, really thick. And my mom adds peppercorns and a lot of ghee and chickpea flour, and you serve it over rice, and it is like being wrapped up in a cozy blanket. It's so good. And they made it in Nashville. Manith Chauhan made it. And in Atlanta, Marwan Irani made it at the dinners they hosted. And I was like, I could have eaten like 10 bowls of this stuff. It's so good.
Oh my God, I want that right now in my face.
It's so yummy.
It sounds so good. What is the last meal that you had that made you emotional?
I was in Nashville yesterday, and I guess peaches are just now in season. So
Thank
I went.
God, because last year was a trashy year for peaches.
I went to this place. It was called Marche, and they were doing peach toast. And she was like, This is the first day that we're doing this because we just got peaches in." And it was literally just like grainy bread with ricotta, currants, honey, and then just like tons of peaches. God. And I just wanted to pick up the peaches and eat them, just slathered in the honey and the ricotta. It was so good. And God, I don't like taking pictures of my food, but I was like, I need to take a photo and remember this amazing peach toast.
Oh God, that sounds so good. I really hope this is a good peach year, because last year was.
I have a good feeling.
Good. Oh God, if we can have like simultaneous good peach year and good tomato year, I will be, and a good okra year. I mean, most years are good.
Most years are good okra years, but yeah, tomatoes last year was not very good for tomatoes either.
Yeah, so here's hoping for this year. What is the last meal that somebody made for you in their home?
What's the last meal? My mom, she made me khichdi, which is a lentil and rice porridge, and something really it's almost like an alchemy that happens when you cook rice and lentils in the same pot. Like their respective starches and the pot liquor comes together to just make this like almost congee-like silken velvety texture, and you top it off with a lot of ghee and red chilies, and it's so good. And my mom made it for me the one night that I was home between all these events, and it was perfect.
She just knew you needed to fill your battery.
Yep, exactly. That is what it is. It is a battery-filling dish.
Oh, God, that's lovely. What living musician would you want to cook for, and what would you cook them?
Let's see. Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, someone I'm like really dying to meet is Lizzo.
Yes. I feel like this is achievable.
Yeah, my boyfriend and I bake with Lizzo in the background quite a bit. Like, we both really love her. So I feel like, I'm not as good as baking, but I would like make Seth bake something for Lizzo.
Talk for 1 sec about Seth baking. Explain this, please.
It's an Instagram series in which I document my boyfriend / roommate baking anything, really, whatever he wants to bake. And I guess people really like respond viscerally to the baking process, and Seth's like goofy dancing to Lizzo and Bollywood songs.
And can people follow along? How do they follow?
You can just follow me at PK Gourmet, and then just watch my Instagram stories. If I'm Instagram storying on the weekend, it's usually Seth bakes. In fact, it's really funny. I've been posting all this promotional stuff for my book, and the number of people have been like, yeah, when's Seth baking?
Oh my God. Okay, so he gets a series 2.
I hope so. Or at least I hope like at the end of like there's like a 10-minute segment at the end of each show where it just like cuts to Seth bakes and he's in his Book of Mormon apron and like making baklava.
Oh my God, I would subscribe instant. I will pay for this to watch. This is amazing. So you've been on the road, and good God, is that exhausting?
Yes.
And you've been doing all this. Let's say you have 5 uninterrupted minutes for self-care. What do you do?
Oh, that's a really great question. I would like go on a 5-minute run with my best friend Kate. Seriously, she is my rock. I have an actual therapist, but she is like my healthy friend equivalent of a therapist. I don't know what I would do without her. And the like small 24-hour periods that I've had in New York in between book tour stops, we've gone for runs. We'll just run anywhere. I'll get off the plane, put on my workout clothes, meet her. We're not fast runners. We talk while we run. We're doing 11-minute miles, but like that, nothing calms me down. Like just like running with Kate.
I love this. I love all of this. And I'm so glad you came today. And people buy this book. Cook from the book. Make sure that Priya sees you cooking from the book. You can tag her on Instagram at PK Gourmet.
Yeah.
On Twitter, all these things. But I think you've done something. I can't wait for award season next year because it's going to be all over there. But you've done something that is really important and beautiful, and I just can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you. This was really wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here today. And people can find you online at priyakrishna.com.
.me.
.me, okay.
Yeah, .com was taken.
Oh my gosh, darn you, other Priya Krishna. And thank you to our producers, Jennifer Martinick and Alicia Cabral. Thanks to Douglas Wagner for our delightful theme song. If you like what you heard, please tell a friend, write a review, or rate us. And those really matter in people finding the podcast, it getting listed, us getting to do these more often. If there is someone you would like us to talk about, something you'd like us to talk about, or a guest you'd like to hear from, please let us know. And you can find me on Twitter at kittenwithawhip. Find out more about the show and catch up on all the episodes at foodandwine.com and Food and Wine's YouTube page. Thank you for listening. Take good care of yourself till the next time, and go buy the book.